The idea for this book came out of the sky. It was like going to the movies. By the time I got home, I could see the whole thing, and I understood the themes these characters were wrestling with. I knew exactly where it needed to be said, and all of this came at me, it felt like, and was wildly exciting, but also flat out terrifying. Like, what do I know about writing suspense novels? And yet, this had happened to me before. 12 years ago, when I had the idea for The Paris Wife, it also came at me out of the sky, and I had never really read or thought about writing historical fiction, and yet it became one of the most transformative experiences of my life. One of the through lines of my work is a driving fascination with resilience, what it is and where it comes from, and how we get through when life gives us way too much to carry. Essentially, how we survive unsurvivable things and somehow become ourselves along the way. Anna Hart, the missing persons detective at the center of my novel, is my favorite kind of character to read about. She's flawed. She struggles with the things we all do, how to make sense of her life, make peace with the past, how to reconcile her mistakes, her regrets, how to forgive herself when she believes she's long past forgiving. She is a mix of light and dark, lost and found, courage and fear. She's us. Another reason why I'm obsessed with Anna as a character is the way she has given me an opportunity as a writer to get to the bottom of things that have long been on my mind. As a survivor of childhood trauma, I'm always seeking to know if it's possible to truly heal from traumatic events, to learn to trust again, to not just heal, but grow. I want to believe that it is sometimes our greatest and most difficult pain that leads us to our life's purpose. This is the most intimate, personal book I've ever written. I've written 8 books now, and yet, in a way, this feels like my debut, and that I'm just getting started. I'm so excited for you to read it.
Cheers to you two drinking there. Cheers. Cheers, ladies.
I know. We have to celebrate.
We have to celebrate that.
We are celebrating.
Yeah.
Say hi,
And Paula, we're so excited that you are back with us.
Thank you. You know how much I love Warwick's and how much you've supported my career through the years. I have never done a book tour without stopping in San Diego. And it's just really nice to see old friends.
Yes. So we're so thrilled, and we're just, shall we hold this up? We are so, shall I say thrilled? That a pun intended. We are like so excited about this and so happy for you, and such a great book. And so let me do my little thing and then I'll get off so you two can have a great conversation.
And I'll talk to my friend Christina.
Exactly.
Well.
Exactly.
So tonight, I'm going to put that beautiful book in the comment section so that you can quickly order it from Warwick's. We can ship it to you. Some people have already ordered it, so those will be shipping out to you. There is a way for you to participate tonight. So go ahead and put your questions. If you scroll over the screen, if you're not familiar with Zoom, if you scroll over the screen down at the bottom, there's a Q&A section. Put your questions in there, and Christina's going to bring those in live as Paula and her talk. And they'll be talking for about 45 minutes tonight. So a nice, good conversation. So without further ado, just real quick about Warwick's. For those of you that don't know, we are located in, like Paula said, we're in San Diego, La Jolla, California. We're actually going to be celebrating our 125th anniversary this year.
That's amazing.
So in November, we're hoping that, you know, California COVID, we can have a nice party and celebration. So we're inviting the world. So if you have ever connected with Warwicks, we want everybody to come and celebrate with us. So
Wonderful. Congratulations.
thank you.
Great.
We were talking about, you know, speaking of historical novelists, I can't remember who we had on the other day, but she said, think of all the things that Warwicks has seen over those 125 years.
Yeah, true.
2 world wars, 2 pandemics. I mean,
It's
so lots of
amazing.
stuff.
It's amazing. It's such an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're in the San Diego area, we would love for you to come by the store and buy Christina's book and Paula's book and all kinds of other people's books. So, but with that, let me do my official duty and introduce these 2 lovely ladies, and then I will get off the screen. So
Thank you.
Paula Mclean is the New York Times bestselling author of the novels Love and Ruin, Circling the Sun, The Paris Wife, and A Ticket to Ride. The memoir Like Family, Growing Up in Other People's Houses, and 2 collections of poetry. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Good Housekeeping, Oh, the Oprah Magazine, Town and Country, The Guardian, The Huffington Post, and elsewhere. She lives in Ohio with her family. And Christina Baker Kline is a #1 New York Times bestselling author. Her 8 novels, including Orphan Train, The Exiles, and A Piece of the World, and she is published in 40 countries. Her novels have been awarded numerous accolades and have been chosen by hundreds of communities, universities, and schools as One Book, One Read selections. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the New York Times Book Review, the Boston Globe, the San Francisco Chronicle, Psychology Today, Poets and Writers, and Salon, among other places. Born in England and raised in the American South and Maine, she lives in New York City and on Mount Desert Island in Maine, which I think is where you're at now. So with that, you 2 have a wonderful conversation, and we'll see you in about 40 minutes
Julie.
or so.
Thank you, Warwicks.
Thank you.
And
That
thank
is
you,
great. Okay, so we
Christina.
have, oh my gosh. Well, let me just, oh my gosh. I'm verklempt because Paula is one of my favorite humans, not just writer humans, but humans in the world. And I want to open by saying, hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so honored to be here and thrilled to be here. And the past month, watching Paula gear up for this book launch has been truly the most vicarious joy I think I've ever had. I know how much work went into this amazing new novel. I was privileged to see it a year ago or a little bit less, I guess.
Maybe a year and a half ago in draft form.
A year and a half more. And to read it again this week and to see, it was fantastic when I read it a year ago and a year and a half ago, and now it's just so beautiful. And I feel that this is a total breakthrough for you in so many ways. And I can't wait to talk to you about all of that.
Well, you know, I've admired your work for years and what you do as a writer, but then since we've become friends, just love you so much, and I can't thank you enough for helping me with my launch week and for being so gracious and being in conversation with me tonight. You're one of my favorite people to talk to. So,
well, we just have an endless conversation. We're texting all day long, many days. We have lots of that going
let's
on.
talk about.
And I want to say before I'm gonna let you talk, but let me just say that today I did a social media post about you, and the point of it was that you, our friendship and the friendships we've made together, I suppose, or meeting each other's friends and things like that, really reminds me of the value for people like us who work in a room all day alone, right, of having a writing community. And that's one of the things that you're really good at, Paula. So thank you for that.
It definitely makes life richer when we share what we know without competition. But more than that, like share the ups and downs, you know, and the wild ride of it, and to share good news and also bad news, and to talk through questions and problems. It is what I've always searched for, right? An actual community of writers. And then when you combine that with the community of readers and booksellers and libraries and librarians, I believe all of it. I think our stories connect us, and now we're connected. It's beautiful.
You know, this book, I think, has hit a nerve. You've got such incredible feedback and response from booksellers, from librarians, from readers. Tell us, so for those who've joined tonight who haven't read your book yet, tell us what the story is. Tell them what the story is.
Yeah. Just to boil it down, the sort of Reader's Digest condensed version
Yeah.
of the story. It's about a seasoned missing persons detective in San Francisco who has a terrible tragedy in her family life that she feels responsible for. So this is how we meet her, but we don't know what that terrible tragedy is. And then she returns home kind of in this state. And home for her, even though she grew up in foster care like I did, home for her is Mendocino, California. She goes there to heal, and yet the first day she arrives, she sees a missing poster for a 15-year-old girl that's vanished. And kind of against her will, against her good sense, she finds herself getting involved in the case, and then more than that, becoming completely obsessed with finding this girl. And we see the way that their two stories intertwine, the way their destinies intertwine. And at the same time, what I've done is, as I've done in my previous novels, blurred fact and fiction. So in the narrative, in the novel, I've woven in cases of real missing persons. And yeah, that's that, and lots of other things besides. But yeah, that's the main story.
You know, one of the things that I was noticing as I was sort of preparing for tonight was how many that you've taken chances in your writing career. You wrote a memoir that was very personal to you, although we'll talk about that because lately you've been sharing even more about your own life. And then you moved to, I love the story, and I'd love for you to tell it, of how you first became, you had a eureka moment when you were teaching a class that led to your first.
Yeah, when I came upon the idea of the Paris wife. So it's, I mean, yes, my career has been strangely, I don't know, you'd even say schizophrenic, right? I got my start as a poet, and then I wrote a memoir, and then I wrote a novel that was a contemporary novel, and then I had this crazy idea. I read Ernest Hemingway's A Movable Feast, and I just had this idea to write that world from Hadley's point of view. I had never even read historical fiction. I didn't know if that book had already been written. I just felt hijacked by this extraordinary idea, which I followed down the rabbit hole, and followed Hadley Richardson down the rabbit hole and out again in 1920s Paris. And of course, that book then changed my career.
Your life.
Yeah, it changed my life. And I've spent the last 10 years in that genre, and happily in that genre, finding little known women from history, although mostly they find me, and becoming completely obsessed with their lives and animating these moments in history and taking on their voices. And it feels to me that it's been such a joy and a pleasure, just an honor to be able to do that. And I thought I'd just keep doing that indefinitely until that kind of same thing happened, where I got hijacked by an idea, and it was this. It was a missing persons detective who becomes obsessed with a vanished teenage girl. And I'd never had that idea before. You know, you and I, we love creativity and the imagination. I think we both have a healthy relationship with our subconsciouses, and we're very excited to entertain ideas. And yet a lot of ideas that come to visit you, you wouldn't just say, oh, I'm going to write a novel about that. You'd be like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And then you'd flick it away and go back to the book that you were writing. Do you know what I mean?
Why did this one stay with you?
I think it's because it just kept bothering me, you know, it just kept coming back, like tapping me on the shoulder. I was in the middle of writing Love and Ruin which is set in the Spanish Civil War. And the speaker is Martha Gellhorn, one of the most prominent war correspondents of the 20th century. And I was really enmeshed in that story. I was in Madrid in 1937. That's where I was in my imagination. And yet this other idea kept coming at me, and it was so different. It was so radically different from any idea I'd had before that I couldn't help but think that it was some sort of a sign, that the same thing that had happened with the Paris wife. And the sign was, or seemed to be, inviting me to take a huge risk with my career, which I had done before, and to kind of jump off a cliff, which I seem to do maybe every 10 years. I need to throw myself off a cliff in order to keep growing. Maybe.
I think you do. I think you do. I think people do. And I think that
right? We need to change. And
well, I think that's one thing that sets you apart from so many people, including writers, is that we tend to, I always say this to my students, we tend to create rules for ourselves about what we do, what we're good at. And those rules keep us from being good at other things. We set our own limits. And you keep breaking through the limits that you've set for yourself. You keep reinventing. And I think that's incredibly important in this world where nothing is certain, and also where we're growing. I mean, every decade I get older, I feel like my interests, I pull through some interests and others shift.
Yeah, there are definite through lines. I think I can find definite through lines in your work if you'd like me to tell you what they are. But yeah, I do think that sometimes we put ourselves in boxes, right? Yes. Somebody says, oh, you're this, right? I remember the first time I ever went to a writer's colony, and you've been there too, Breadloaf, right? It's this very exciting thing. And I was a young poet, and I was just listening to what everybody was saying, and like a groupie, right? Surrounded by famous writers, and going to these workshops and being told, oh, no, don't do that. You're a narrative poet. And somebody would say, no. Actually, what you are is a lyric poet. And each time I felt snagged and pulled in these various directions. And the reason I could be snagged was because I hadn't quite figured out what I was. And I don't mean in terms of genre, because I've written through all of these genres now, and I've even written, essays and screenplays, and it doesn't matter. It's almost like, and I know you've read Elizabeth Strout, right? Mm-hmm. One of my favorite novels of all time is My Name is Lucy Barton. And there's this wonderful line, because Lucy has also come from trauma and displacement, and she wants to be a writer. And her first writing teacher tells her, don't ever worry about story. You only have one. And maybe that's true, that it doesn't matter what genre we're writing in or what story pulls us, because we just have the one, right? We just have the one story to tell. So surrender to it and take those chances.
Well, along those lines, I had an interesting realization today, which is that in the New York Times profile of you, maybe they'll post that in the comments because it's a wonderful profile, and we'll talk a little bit more about that also. So in the past few months, Paula she's written a modern love column. Your old modern love column was reissued like a few months ago.
And featured on the podcast that I wrote in 2008 that resurfaced. It was crazy.
It's crazy. So you did 2 of those, and then you had a Times profile. You just had a review. But in these, I was looking at themes and things you were talking about with your work. And so you say that you viewed your historical novels, The Paris Wife, Circling the Sun, Love and Ruin, as a feminist act, quote, a way to give depth and dimension to unclaimed missing women. And I realized that's exactly, literally what you've done in this novel, is give depth and dimension to quote unquote unclaimed missing women, although in a totally different way. So when you're talking about
different way, but doing kind of exactly the same thing and giving voice to the voiceless, right? And it is a feminist act, right? Because
talk about that a little bit.
Because I'm writing about women kind of reclaiming themselves And of course, someone like Hadley Richardson, who is eclipsed by a larger than life figure and who disappears from history and has her story stolen in a way. And then I kind of bring it back. Yeah, Hemingway's wife. In this novel, what's happening, or what the feminist act part of it, is shining a light on violence and trauma and the ways that sometimes we can be silenced by our own stories. But there can be recovery, right? We can dig ourselves out of the places we find ourselves. We can overcome our experience. We can transform our lives. We can make different choices. We can make radical acts of self-rescue. And so this is what I have my characters working on, because this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm interested in as a woman now, in this exact moment in history, right? So it was so freeing, both to kind of blow the ceiling off, because for the last 10 years, 12 years, I've been in the voices of real women. I can't make up plot. The plot is already there, right? It's already there. And so now, just that the fact that anything could happen, the fact that this character who came to me like a bolt out of the sky, knocking on my door, has an agenda. She has a message, and the message is very close to my message.
Yes. You have talked about how in your own memoir, which you wrote a while ago.
Yeah, it was published in 2003, like Family, yeah.
Before the novels, that it was widely praised, and it's absolutely beautiful. But you say that now that you withheld some things in it, and that now you've been speaking more freely. What do you think has changed for you?
Well, I grew up, that's part of it. I had a whole bunch of therapy, which is another part of it. But no, when I wrote Like Family, which was published, like I said, in 2003, just a few years after I got an MFA in poetry, what I did was, yes, go back and look at my own story and talk about my experiences in foster care. But I did it all from the point of view of someone who hadn't really done the work of processing all of that. I was a super young woman, as I said, I hadn't even had therapy yet. I didn't know. What I knew how to do was write. So I wrote these scenes. They're incredibly, I want to say, it's a close first person point of view, a child's point of view of what's actually occurring descriptively. But what we never get in the memoir, because I didn't actually have access to it, is the older, wiser point of view that comes in and makes sense of all of that, what it felt like, what it means to have that experience as a child, the dislocation, the uncertainty, the abandonment, the loss, the grief, the violence, which was life-altering. But I didn't have that point of view. It's only been as I've lived it, and as I've lived the surviving of it. There's what happens to us, and then there's how we come through the fire and speak.
Have you found,
that's what I'm doing now? Yeah.
As you've gotten older, that new things have come up for you from your past?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've managed to weave them into the book, because it occurred to me that Anna as a character could take all of this, right? Could take my obsessions. So it's not just that I've, had a bunch of therapy and tried to work through my past. And this novel, I mean, if you've not read it, don't be confused. It's a thriller. Like, it's a page-turning thriller where a detective tries to find a missing girl and all of that. And there's a serial killer, and it's that book. But then woven into the book is other stuff that I myself am fascinated with, and that Anna, my detective, becomes fascinated with. she is susceptible because of the way she grew up and what she's carrying. She is susceptible to the stories of the disenfranchised, to young women who have been silenced by violence, by trauma, right?
Yeah.
And so she's interested in trauma. She's interested in the ways that we become victims, and she's interested in how predators find victims, right? What is the kind of chilling subterranean connection between predators and victims, and how do they find each other? And that's what Anna's interested in, and that's what I'm interested in. And part of my own journey as a woman has been trying to heal my own trauma, and I've met with trauma therapists. And in fact, Christina, there are moments in the book that are almost straight up things therapists and trauma experts have said to me, right? About victimhood, and about how we heal ourselves, about how we can change our stories.
I don't know if you said this in an interview you're in with Kristen, Hannah, our friend, the other day, or if it was in another interview, but you have talked about how it's not just that the predator finds the victim, it's that there's something in the victim that is
vulnerable. Vulnerable.
Can you talk about what that is?
Yeah, so there's a moment in the book, and I hope you will read it and kind of catch up to this kind of larger, deeper conversation that Christina and I are having about the underlying themes of the book, which are important to me. I mean, I wrote the book because it's a story I need to tell, and I think that it's a story that's familiar to us. But when I was a kid, I often had a question about how it was that violence kept finding me. And that if somehow, not that it was my fault exactly, but that I was transmitting a kind of signal, right? And then I met a trauma therapist who I told him my story, and he said that to me exactly. He said, think about it. Everybody comes into the world pure. The soul is pure, right? Completely unmarred. And yet for some of us, 1 in 10, 1 in 7, maybe, violence happens, abuse, trauma, abduction, whatever the trauma is. All of us endure trauma, of course. He said it's like black tar that covers that light. And when the light shines through, it creates a bat signal. And every sort of predator, narcissist, sociopath, whatever bad relationship kind of can see that light and comes running, and these are how these two people connect. And when he said that, I mean, my mouth fell open. I'm like, that's it. That's the thing I couldn't put my finger on when I was a kid, that thing I didn't know was happening. And of course, it's not the victim's fault. It's completely unconscious, right? It's certainly not the victim's fault that the tar has come in, that the trauma has come in, but the predator absolutely knows how to find those victims. It's clear as day, which doesn't mean that you can't heal those scars, that the tar can't come out. I honestly believe that everyone can heal. And I believe that we can use even the deepest suffering and pain to find our life's purpose.
I'm getting chills as you're saying this, because I just reread the ending again, reread it, and was struck by how thrilling it is, how scary it is, how suspenseful. And I thought I had read, I guess that you said that, and I was thinking about how one of the reasons reading this book is such a deep experience. I mean, you're reading a thriller or literary suspense or whatever it's called.
Whatever you're going to call it, yeah.
Which is, many of us like to read them as a sort of escape, and it is that, but there's such depth to it. And that's what I think sets it apart from so many other books. And so you're reading this book and you immerse, and you really do feel your personal connection on whatever level, that you understand. Not only are you showing a sort of I mean, we have all seen made-for-TV movies where the guy is after the girl,
Yeah,
woman,
it's a convention. It's archetypal story. It's
convention.
like what happens, right? It's
But
what
you're
happens.
showing us why, in a way, not just why the predator does it, but why it happens. You're really excavating
Yes.
that.
How
And
victims become victims, how predators become predators. And what I'm really interested in is how the same experience can happen to two different people, and yet they twist in two different directions. So if there's a baseline kind of baked in theme of the book, and it's the adage, healed people heal people, and hurt people hurt people, right? You can have the same experience. Anna has a connection to the victim. She understands something
Anna,
profound. The missing
detective.
girl, exactly. But she also has a profound connection with the murderer, with the killer. And this is the story I wanted to tell. The way that we all share infrastructure, like we all share emotional DNA. Things happen, life contains suffering. It's what we do with that, right? Someone can twist in one direction and another person can twist in another direction. And it has to do with healing and with self-awareness and with asking those questions. Why am I here? Like, what am I meant to know? And who am I meant to connect with? Right?
As I was reading the book, I was wondering, was it painful for you to write? Was any of this emotionally difficult? And before you answer, I just want to say that I was inspired to ask that question because I recently read Emma Donohue's book about Pull of the Stars, which is about the flu epidemic in 1918.
I've not read
someone
it yet.
said someone said it was so harrowing. Was it hard to write? And she said, when you're in the process, when you're in it, you're just living and breathing it. You don't feel, I'm not experiencing what the reader's experiencing who's coming to it for the first time. So I wondered, what do you find?
No, the bits that are kind of closely aligned with my obsessions that we've been talking about, right? Healing and trauma and all of that were not difficult to write. They were incredibly, they were fascinating. This is the stuff that I think about and talk about all the time. The bit that was difficult is this other part of the novel, which is the real victims of abductions that are woven through the story. So that's the place where the fact and fiction blur. That was not my original intention to include real victims in the story. It was an aha moment as I was doing research. I decided to set the book in 1993 because I wanted it to be pre-DNA testing, pre-criminal profiling, and pre-internet, pre-cell phone. I was really driven to tell a story that was much more character-based and not procedural. So once I decided that, I set the book in 1993, and it was already set in the fall of 1993. So I started to do research trying to find veracity and authenticity for my character. My detective, she's an expert, right? She has to sound like an expert. She has to have all this wisdom. And so I was listening to a podcast with the lead detective on the Paula Mclean case, and he started to name dates, and it was October 1st of 1993 that she was abducted, Paula Mclean, from her bedroom in the middle of a slumber party while her two 12-year-old friends watched. And he says October 1st. October 1st, 1993 is 10 days after my imaginary victim goes missing 60 miles away. And I got chills. I just got chills. I thought, I have to include this story because it really happened. And it's almost the same moment, Christina, when I found Hadley Richardson for the first time and I realized this is a real woman from history. I have an obligation and a responsibility to tell her story as truthfully as I can with as much dignity and respect. And the same moment happened. I'm like, this is the truth. I'm going to tell the truth about what happens sometimes to families, to women, and to tell it with dignity. Yeah.
And your story breathes in part because it's almost like what you we're getting at on some subterranean level is what was going on at the same time. I mean, today in the New York Times, the news
Did
today,
you see that about Kristen Smart?
unbelievable. Let's tell people
Yeah, we have
what
to
came
tell
out
that
today about.
story. Yes.
Yes.
So just today in the New York Times, they were talking about how Kristen Smart, who was a victim who disappeared from Cal Poly campus when she was 19 years old, in 1996, that they've just arrested her killers, that just happened today after 26 years. And they interviewed the parents who were talking about what a relief it is finally to have
Right.
some closure. I don't believe, closure, right? Like their daughter is gone, like at what level? But it's terrifying to think about a family who for 26 years hasn't really known what's happened to their daughter.
Right, exactly.
And that there
Exactly the
can be,
here.
and that there can be information still found after 26 years. It was just, wasn't that amazing to read about? That these are things that happen in lives. They're not just things that happen in novels. So why not talk about the stuff that really happened?
Well, I love that you've taken some of your own methodology of writing books with real characters
and
blended
weaving
it.
them together. Yeah, thank you.
Because that feels really new and interesting and fascinating. Okay, I've been asking a million questions. I know we only have a few minutes left, so let me get to the questions.
Yeah,
from the audience.
absolutely.
Okay.
Delighted to. Yeah. Okay.
So Yadana asks, when Paula writes about real life people, does she visit the places or cities that they lived in? How does she absorb the culture and atmosphere of the time that she visits?
Okay, complicated question that I'll try to answer very quickly. When I wrote The Paris Wife, I was dead broke and I quit my job to write that book. I quit all my jobs and I was a young mother. And so I couldn't afford to go to Paris. So I read my way there and I wrote in a coffee shop and I imagined Paris. I dreamed it. And when I wrote about colonial Kenya, I decided the formula had worked so well for me, almost like this magic carpet ride of my imagination, that I wouldn't go to Kenya until I had already dreamed my way there in the book. But then, of course, I did go to Kenya and I did go to Paris and I did go to Cuba and Key West and Spain and all the places my characters went. And here I did go to Mendocino and I stayed in a cabin in the woods that I put my character in, and enlivened that place richly in my imagination. It's a marriage. It's a marriage of the textural details that find their way to our work, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sights and smells and all of it, that's what gives it life. That's what I want to write. I want to write a place. And to me, Mendocino in the novel is a character, right? That
it really is.
It breathes and lives and creates,
Yeah. I just want everyone to know that the atmosphere, the place is so beautifully told, shown. And that's your background as a poet. I mean, I feel that when we're talking about things that go through all of your work, I also only studied poetry in college. I didn't write fiction until a little bit later. And I think there's something about being immersed in that kind of language and structure that does affect your writing, no matter what genre you're writing in.
I think readers like to be swept away. I can tell you that as a reader, I want to be swept away. And that place, for whatever reason, really matters to me as a reader. And so I want to create that, I want to create that feeling and to create an entire world. I mean, that's why we read, to suspend reality, to replace our current situation with an entire world that then becomes populated with these voices, right? That feel like they become our friends, that we know these people. It's amazing.
You're completely transported. I just read Hamnet.
Oh my God, it's on my TBR list. I can't.
Maddie O'Farrell. Yeah, and so what you're saying right now, going from, you know, Shakespeare's Stratford-on-Avon to your novel in Mendocino, who doesn't want to just read all the time? That's how I feel right now.
I know, exactly. I know.
Okay, so Dina asked a question that I was going to ask, which I love, which is, would you consider writing a second memoir? She calls it Through the Fire. She's already given you a title. And from the perspective, she says it, the wise you perspective.
Yeah, I do think about that sometimes. So in the New York Times column that Christina mentioned, The Modern Love, what I do is talk about how I finally realized as an adult, I'm 55 years old. I mean, it takes a lifetime, right? Sometimes to figure these things out, to do your work, as they say. That sort of connecting the dots between my early trauma, which happened, I mean, I was 4 years old when my mother left, and I spent my entire childhood, 14 years, bouncing through the California foster care system. It's taken me kind of all that time to realize how that early trauma has manifested in all of my interpersonal relationships, but particularly my romantic relationships, right? That older, wiser voice could only come in once I could see it all. I didn't see it for a long time. So that piece, that modern love piece, I've never received more feedback, more responses, more letters, more me too than any other piece I've ever written. I got thousands of letters. I'm still answering them, by the way. If you wrote to me, I'm gonna write to you. But which makes me, I mean, it's a long way to say it makes me think that it's not just my story, right? It's other people's stories as well. And that's another reason why we read, Christina, to recognize ourselves in stories.
Well, I think you've been radically honest. And I wonder, Paula, do you feel exposed? How does it feel to be
when I do that, when I connect the dots so clearly, yes, absolutely, I feel exposed. But you know, when I was a kid and these terrible things were happening to me, and I felt completely alone and silenced, the way my missing girl is silenced in the novel.
Exactly.
Right? I didn't have a voice. And so now I do. So there is a way to take that voicelessness and to, right? And to use that and to turn powerlessness into power. And because I can do that, and not everybody can, right? Then it becomes again, it becomes a humanist act, right?
You're tapping
And it's
into
really
something
important, right? It's important
that so many
because if
people
one
feel.
person feels less alone, or one person recognizes themselves, and that's something that came through to me in the letters too. People telling me, you're not alone, and people telling me, I feel less alone. Why else are we here except to connect on that level? It's beautiful.
That must be thrilling, because people respond to novels in all kinds of ways, and we've had many of those respond, you know, we all know what that is, but to write something so personal and to have people be helped and even healed in some way by it must be
Right.
quite.
Julie, did you see Julie's comment across the bottom where she says we could have a few more minutes, which is very
Is that
great.
okay with you, Paula? Do you want to take another
Okay.
few?
It's okay with me.
Great...
I feel like the questions are here and we should honor them.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
okay,
let's
so the next question, I just want to say Amy Jo Burns is asking this question, and she's written a gorgeous novel called Shiner, and I did an event with her, debut novelist.
Oh, yes, I want to read that. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm giving a shout out to Shiner right now.
Okay.
Okay, she says, I'd love to know how Paula taught herself how to write in the new thriller genre, since it can be really different from other kinds of fiction. That's a good question.
It is a good question. So I taught myself by failing a lot, and I wrote many, many, many drafts of this book, and it was deeply inefficient. But I decided that I didn't want to read a bunch of thrillers. I didn't want to read a bunch of suspense novels because I didn't want to feel that the conventions were hemming me in. I had read 3, I guess, big hitters in the genre, and I reread them. I love Tana French.
Yep,
I
Tana
love
French.
Kate Atkinson, her case history novels. Those, it's absolutely amazing. And then I'm a big fan of Louise Penny, who is a Canadian novelist who has this series set in Three Pines. Anyway, so I'm like, I like lyricism. I like character-driven books, atmospheric, kind of more books that also have a theme. You know, it's not just about whodunit. And so that's how I kind of studied their work and figured out how they did what they did. And then I failed a lot. I never had to like plant clues. I'd never had to like hide the identity of a killer, but then sort of intimate it and then still have it feel inevitable at the end, and all the things that readers in the genre expect and need to be satisfied as they read. And so every time I came back to it, I just added another layer and worked my tail off. That's how I taught myself.
You really did. I saw that happening.
Yeah, you did. You taught on the front lines, Christina, and were very helpful as a reader to me.
I do have to say Tana French is fantastic. And when I read your novel, I can so feel her. And I think if people loved your book, they'll love Tana French.
I admire her
okay,
so much. Yeah, more questions. Okay.
McCluskey asks, I loved Paula's previous books, and I'm really looking forward to reading the new one. Did Paula watch the recent PBS Ken Burns, we've talked about the special on Hemingway, and if so, what did you think?
Yes, I loved it. I was lucky enough to have gotten an early look from the producers who reached out and said, you know, you might want to see this. And of course, it was stunning. It was also a really emotional experience for me because they all came back to life, and particularly Carrie Russell doing Hadley's voice, if you've seen it.
I can't wait to see it.
Absolutely amazing. There's such richness and depth and emotionality and just sensitivity. I burst into tears when I heard her bring Hadley to life. It was absolutely amazing. It's beautiful. I mean, Ken Burns, right? Is he going to do it wrong? No.
Yeah.
But I also felt really territorial, you know, because here's Gary Carr and Edna O'Brien and Tobias Wolff and sort of commenting on Hemingway's stories and his life and his psychology and I've spent, you know, a decade like accidentally steeping myself in Hemingway's voice. And I just kind of felt territorial, like almost like a jealous wife, right? Like he belongs to me. Stop talking about him. He's not around to defend himself.
I totally understand that. How fun. Okay, Kat Burko, who I'm going to tell everyone right now, was my assistant because I am so generous. I told you about her. I'm so thrilled that we both share an assistant.
We share an assistant who happens to be a treasure as a human being. And I don't know why you were so generous enough to share her.
I don't either.
Anyway,
no,
Kat,
I do. It's so much fun. It enriches both of us. Like she learns things from your team. That
she's amazing. And I think her parents are watching tonight. So anyway, does she have a real question or is she just saying hello?
She says, hi. She says, Anna has a deep connection to the natural world, Anna, the central character, and often refers to it as quote unquote medicine. What does this mean in the book? And is this something that's also been a powerful presence in your life?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so Anna grows up in foster care, and then she arrives in Mendocino, and she is with a family, the father of which is a forest ranger and a survivalist expert. Anna is a survivor too, but of a different sort. And he basically connects with her by teaching her about how to survive in the woods, how to build a fire, how to build shelter, how to know the natural world. And he sees in her that she has these wounds that she won't show anyone. And he believes that nature can help heal her. And of course it does. And she has a powerful connection to nature. And yeah, I grew up as a kid with a lot of upheaval, and it was something I knew how to do, which was to take it outside, to be in nature, to to lie down on the grass and look up at the stars and feel connected to something larger, Hap, who is the foster father, tells Anna that nature is medicine. And I still believe, I believe that now. I took a 4-mile walk today. You can't tell me nature's not medicine.
You got to come up to Megan and visit, and then you'll really
And
see.
walk 4 miles on Mount Desert. I would love it.
Yeah.
I'll be there tomorrow.
Okay, we have one last question that I'm going to
Yes.
shove in here because it's our mutual adorable novelist friend, Priya Parmer.
Oh, Priya. Oh my God. So she wrote Vanessa and Her Sister about,
Yeah.
obviously about Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell, which is a beautiful novel. Yeah. And she's a dear friend of ours. Priya, hello.
She's fantastic. So she writes, how did this extraordinary time we're living through, this time of isolation and sickness, affect your writing? Which, by the way, I think is a great question to end on.
It is a great question. And of course, it's difficult because what it requires of us, the work requires that we spend time completely surrendering, right? Surrendering to a world that takes all of our attention. It takes all of our energy. And yet for the past year, none of us have attention or focus or right energy. We're distracted, we're pulled away. And all I can say is 2 things. It was really helpful for me to be in revision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which requires so much, on a detail level. The book was just pulling me in and asking me to do a lot. And it helped that I had that as an anchor point. And then the other thing I would say is my kids, I write in my home office because my kids go away to school. And yet they were at school here all around me, making mac and cheese in the kitchen and turning on the microwave and doing laundry and knocking on my door. And I had to learn how to do both and to invite them into the space and not to feel so protective about it. And in the end, now that they're back in school, I really miss them. I miss the noises they make. I miss whatever, right? I miss the mac and cheese. It's been a really interesting experience. Thanks for the question, Priya.
That's
nice to hear from you and to hear from so many friends and to be here with Warwicks and to have just a delightful, rich, deep, meaningful conversation with my friend Christina. Thank you.
That's great, Paula. Thank you.
Thank you both. That was a fantastic conversation.
Thanks,
I mean,
Jen.
it's just, you both are treasures. Love.
We could do this. You can probably understand that we could
24 hours.
kind of do this for a really long time.
Yeah,
And
we could keep
might have to host this again.
Just come back, just like pop in and we'll just like have a chat, right?
That sounds great.
I know.
Sounds great.
And love that Amy Jo is here. We're going to host her at the end of May. So looking forward
That's
to hosting.
fantastic.
Yay.
Yeah. So yay with Amy Jo.
Yay.
Good.
Paula, we love you. Thank you.
Thank you and good luck with and congratulations on your anniversary.
Yeah.
And Christina, your beautiful novel, The Exiles, when will it be out in paperback?
Very nice question, Paula. It's going to be out in paperback in July and July 6th. So we're looking forward to that.
Well, if you've not read The Exiles, it's a absolutely amazing novel about basically the founding of Australia.
Exactly.
Convict women and estranged, voiceless women who Christina gives voice to. And so
Okay, you're super nice to say this, but the event is ending and we're going back.
we're still here.
But Christina, but I love that
good night.
I love that you did that, Paula, because we love the paper. Lots of people wait for paperback. We love hardcovers, but they want paperbacks for book clubs and things. So we can't wait for Christina for that to come.
Yeah.
out.
So
right.
the paperback, that's great. Meanwhile, this is the most gorgeous hardcover.
I have the galley,
It's
so
got a
sorry.
shiny spine.
It does have a shiny spine. It's beautiful.
It's got fun effects.
Yeah.
Thanks to Kristen Hanna telling Paula that she had to have something funky going on. It's really beautiful.
Yeah,
and
it really
it's a
is.
gorgeous book. And I feel honored to be here. Thank you both.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
Christina. Thank you,
Lovely.
Julie.
This is being recorded, so it's going to end up on our YouTube channel. So if people came in late or missed anything, they can pop on there to see that. Please order the books. We just, if you love an author's book, you gotta buy the books. We'd love for you to buy them from Warwick's, but buy them from somebody. So ladies,
Right.
can't wait to have, when I turn this off, we go away. So there's no like green room to pop back into. So
It's
thank you
okay.
both.
Yes,
Thanks,
absolutely.
Julie.
Good night and thank you.
Yeah.
Love
All
Paula.
right.
Bye.
Bye everybody.
Bye, guys.